Welcome to React Roundup. I'm your host, Jack Harrington, and with me today is the incomparable Paige Niederinghaus.
Hey, everybody.
And our guest for this hour is Chris Frewin. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're React famous?
Well, I don't know if I'm famous, but I have a series of blog posts, and my Medium, a few articles on my Medium are quite popular. So you may have read or seen one of my articles there. So.
Cool. And you're a full stack engineer, and you've just been doing some work at a new company doing some cleanup work, and you were blogging about that?
Yes. So that was actually, sad to say, I actually left that company for an opportunity at a startup that I couldn't refuse. That. So
they gave you but you couldn't refuse.
I was there for a month, and that was my contribution, I guess, was bringing that repo up to speed.
Wow. That's
impressive. Yeah, a month.
It's hard to even change your health insurance in that amount of time.
Yeah, on their part, they were that's why it was sad to leave. They were very organized. The management was very good. And yeah, it was amazing to get up to speed and be productive in a few short weeks.
Yeah.
So.
Hey folks, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. And lately I've been working on actually building out Top End Devs. If you're interested, you can go to topenddevs.com/podcast, and you can actually hear a little bit more about my story, about why I'm doing what I'm doing with Top End Devs, why I changed it from devchat.tv to Top End Devs. But what I really want to get into is that I have decided that I'm going to build the platform that I always wished I had with devchat.tv. And I renamed it to Top End Devs because I want to give you the resources that are going to help you to build the career that you want, right? So whether you want to be an influencer in tech, whether you want to go and just max out your salary and then go live a lifestyle with your family, your friends, or just traveling the world or whatever, I want to give you the resources that are going to help you do that. We're going to have career and leadership resources in there, and we're going to be giving you content on a regular basis to help you level up and max out your career. So go check it out at topenddevs.com. If you sign up before my birthday, that's December 14th. If you sign up before my birthday, you can get 50% off the lifetime of your subscription. Once again, that's topenddevs.com.
So what were you trying to solve in your 1 month on the job?
I basically inherited this project. It was a large React-based dashboard. So there were a lot of, not to break any NDA, but there was a lot of charts and visuals and all sorts of things. And it had been going on for quite some time. It was a major client for this company for a few years. And they were the kind of company that they were happy with us. And then they kept saying, okay, we want this. And everybody knows how that goes. You keep building screens. And eventually you have something 300, 400 components.
They metastasize into it, yes.
Yeah. And to be fair, the code base itself, the React itself, I followed very well. They had sort of these reusable chart types where you pass just the data you need and it displays as you would expect, more or less. Nice. So that was quite nice. But the problem was that because I had inherited this project and there were a lot of terms specific to the industry, I had some trouble understanding the code at first, a lot of weird variable names and things like that. And it was doubly hard because it was in plain JavaScript. And for a while now, about 2 or 3 years now, I've been basically, when I do front end stuff in React, it's in TypeScript. And I am a big fan of Visual Studio Code. So I get all the IntelliSense and, okay, I know this is a string, this is a number and whatever, or even the nested types and everything. So I said, yeah, and since this company was so satisfied with us, I said, yeah, they deserve. Let's bring this code base up to speed, or at least sort of a halfway up to speed, as much as I can do. And that's where I kind of, what's that?
In a month, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's why I opted for looking through how the JavaScript was written. I said, well, I have to go through every file and try and figure out the types and infer them from, basically I had the back end as well, the API. I said that will take forever. So just to get TypeScript working it was from Create React App. Mm-hmm. I just created the TS config, and then I thought, yeah, okay, I can kind of an escape hatch, I can just put TS ignore at the top of every file, right? as a starter, which is, I know is very hacky, But then when you run your, like the TSC no emit, it would say 0 errors, right? And then because I wanted to write the newer features in TypeScript. So that was kind of the way. I read a few articles about there are ways to get kind of like both worlds working together. And perhaps when you're only a few components into a Create React app, that's easy. But I said this code base is so large, trying to get the tooling to work might break everything. So I opted kind of for the total conversion to TypeScript, despite those TS ignores.
So let me ask you, if you had, 300 or 400 components in such a large thing, did you actually go file by file and change the .js to .ts or .tsx and like add types and really redo it? Or was it more of you were building new features also, and so you started creating those with .ts and .tsx endings?
Right. So yeah, my new features I wrote in TypeScript because that's what I was most used to. But I forgot to mention that point, to get TypeScript to be happy after I created that TS config, I did need to change all those files. But of course, with it being so big, I didn't want to do it manually. So I wrote a pair of bash scripts to do it for me.
Nice.
So yeah, it was very, I mean, yeah, that's engineering. It's kind of hacky, but it worked in the end. So basically how it worked was the only, I guess, tricky or part you have to be careful with is how I determined if the file should be a pure TypeScript file or TS, or it was a TypeScript React file with the JSX, or in this case, TSX language, and with the TSX file extension. So I basically did a regex on the import React, that string. And if the file included that, then it became a TSX file. Otherwise, it's just a TS. And then the second script, probably I could combine them all into one script, but the second script then went through each, finding all TS and TSX files and put that TS ignore at the first line of the file. So
I got to say, you've come up with my new favorite podcast name ever, and I'm going to launch this tomorrow. That's engineering. that's what you do. That's engineering. Yeah. So actually, to any listener who's on this, like, one of the biggest mistakes I think people make right off the bat with TypeScript is if you've got any JSX in your file, name the thing .tsx, because you'll get the worst error ever when you don't do that. It means nothing. It is like the most incomprehensible error you'll ever get, and everything's fine. It's just you don't have X on the end of the file. And once you do that, all your errors will disappear and it'll all make sense again. So I don't know what that is, but it's bitten me in the butt enough times where I'm just absolutely religious about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
it doesn't happen with JSX. Like, you can have JS files all over the place. They're components. They have JSX, whatever, and they don't need to be named that way. But yeah, I've recently seen that TS and TSX error, and it is completely, it's impossible to figure out what's going on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it had nothing to do with anything. And I'm sure if I looked into the error, it would make sense that's what the error is. But it should just have this thing at the top that says, "You dummy, you put a JSX into this file. You need to rename this TSX."
Yeah, it is such a tricky one, because especially when you're starting out, you're like, oh, I want to learn TypeScript, this new syntax. Of course, the last thing you're thinking about is a single letter in a file extension, right? Right? It is. I mean, yeah, that is kind of, it belongs to TypeScript, right? Because TypeScript is very, hey, do this exactly this way, do this exactly this way. So, but yeah, it's a small but tricky thing, and
it's a throw your computer out the window moment when you finally realize what the error is. You're just like, you've been spending 20 minutes figuring out this thing. You're like totally infuriated that it was a single file, and you're like, goodbye. I don't like this anymore. Okay, so can you tell me, like, obviously, I guess the parameters that you wanted and the hinting and all that you wanted from TypeScript. What was like state management in that system, and how was that done?
So they had Redux as well, but again, kind of the older version, right? So you had
toolkit.
Not toolkit yet. I started putting, again, or a cool thing of Toolkit is you can mix and match, right? They don't care. You can use the older styles and then add your slices in as new. Yeah. So it was Redux. Yeah. And I think kind of part of that goal to convert everything to TypeScript was I'd also learned recently about, what is that? There's the generator. You can, like, from your API, from Open API, you can generate, I think is it Swagger? I think Swagger has a tool for it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You can generate off the Swagger docs and create an API for you.
Swagger endpoints are the best.
Exactly. Yeah. So because
GraphQL. GraphQL code generator. So I just had to throw that in there. But yeah, that works too.
Because I had inherited this giant project with all these weird terms, I said that would be the easiest way for me. I can see kind of all the endpoints generated with all their types, and things will get easier for me. So that was kind of after the big conversion, that was the next step where I was able to, in my new features, write those endpoints. That's something I would still need to look at. My only issue with those generators is they're very, very verbose. At least what I've seen, the files they generate are very big. And I've even thought about, kind of as a side project, to kind of maybe there's a way to rebuild. All you need really is the types, right? And then you want, like, your get post methods. They can kind of be generic in some sort of way. But
well, I've used Swagger both with Node projects and with Java projects. And the great thing about the Java projects is that it is simply just like a one-liner you drop into the config. And because Java is strongly typed and compiled, it just knows exactly how to use it. And I'm assuming that TypeScript is kind of the same way. But can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I am interested if that might be something I'd want to get into in the future. Like, how much actual extra do you have to add? Because with the JavaScript project, it was very much like I had to define absolutely everything and tell it what to expect and what parameters to take in and query params and, is this auth or not and things like that. So with TypeScript, is it much simpler, like maybe an annotation or two and you've got it?
Yeah. So from what I've seen, it's a command line tool, and I'll have to double check. I believe it's Swagger. I'd have to look at the name of the repository, but the very cool thing is, I mean, there is kind of a config step. So you need to define, is your backend, is it written in Java? Is it C# or where's it coming from? And then your target. So in my case, of course, it was TypeScript, but they have other ones too. You can generate it for Angular or I don't know. So, but yeah, so the huge advantage is, you get your full in code, and you even get these service classes. Even you import, like, I don't know, car service, right? And then you can do like car service.create, and you just even the type is there in TypeScript. So that's the huge advantage. But then, of course, the disadvantage is this large file that's generated, and perhaps that's moot depending on if you're doing tree shaking or how that code is extracted when you go to production. But yeah, that's how it's just a command line. Typically I make an npm script, right? And you say like generate client or whatever, some sort of client. But then, yeah, I mean, there's always it's back to that's engineering, and then you have to remember every time you change your backend, or if your backend changes, you have to regenerate that client, right? But you would have to do something like that anyway, even without a generated code generator. So
I'm guessing in a month it probably didn't change.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully not within a month. Yeah. I'm guessing that it sounds like that code generator is modular enough. You could probably write your own thing, but make a smaller output. But you're right, like the tree trimming, and that should get rid of it. Tree pruning, and then also a lot of people complain about like TypeScript code bloat, as if like the code that TypeScript generates is bloated, but it's not. If you look at the back end, like it's basically the equivalent of Babel, right? All the types just kind of disappear, and it really depends on the target. If you're targeting like ES5, you're going to get a lot of extra code to like do all the destructuring and whatever, that kind of thing. But yeah, so yeah, that sounds like a great use of that generator there. We should drop that down into the show notes so that everybody can see that. Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and actually where I'm working currently, so for some reason the previous company that did some of the work for the startup, they chose to use Angular, but it's the same tool. It's that this generator that generates. They have a .NET backend. So yeah, it's quite interesting because I'd always thought about a tool like that, but yeah, it already existed, and now a lot of that stuff is you only find out about it until you need something like it, or you stumble upon it. So
yeah, I've seen it twice.
I
mean, I've used it for, as I say, for GraphQL, and then there's a lot less configuration because it doesn't really matter what the back end is, whether it's Java or C#, it all works the same way. So it's just nice that way. But yeah, no, that's really cool.
So I'm curious how you found the transition between working with TypeScript and React to going to an Angular project, which I assume is also written in TypeScript since they've kind of went that way after Angular 2. I haven't used Angular since AngularJS, the original version. So what did you think kind of transitioning into the much more structured and I guess already derived path or project size and status of an Angular project versus React, where you kind of just do what you feel like and structure it however you want?
Yeah, I might be burned off the podcast for this, but no. So I there are definite things I like about Angular. I have to say, actually, and it's the first time using it is working in my new job here at the startup is working with Angular. I don't know. It's very verbose, at least, all the stuff you have to do, but in a way that's kind of, you see the same patterns over and over again, right? Where the two-edged sword with React is, yes, you can be kind of pick how you want to design everything however you want. Mm-hmm. But then that does mean when you go to a different project or a different company or any different place using React, you can expect anything. Any kind of
always expect the unexpected.
Exactly. Yes. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a benefit to me that Angular uses TypeScript. So I was, at least that half I was used to, since I've been writing React in TypeScript. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have too many opinions. It's kind of weird right now anyway, because that's the Angular is our CMS, which isn't, it's mostly for admins and us to use. We don't have to worry too much about performance or things like that, which is in a way lucky for me because I'm quite new to it. But we still do the mobile app and the website are React, which I'm much faster and much more used to. So,
hi, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been coaching some people on starting some podcasts and in some cases, just taking their career to the next level. Whether you're beginner going to intermediate going to advanced, whether you're trying to get noticed in the community or go freelance, I've been helping these folks figure out how to get in front of people, how to build relationships, and how to build their careers and max out and just go to the next level. So if you're interested in talking to me and having me help you go to the next level, go to topenddevs.com/coaching. I will give you a 1-hour free session where we can figure out what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and figure out what the next steps are. And then from there, we can figure out how to get you to the place you want to go. So once again, that's topenddevs.com/coaching.
Oh, nice. So you're doing kind of a combination between the two, just depending on what feature you're working on. It could either be in Angular or it could be React.
Yeah, and I I don't want anyone to look at my Angular code. I have no idea if I'm following any patterns, but there's a lot of code to borrow and look at and reuse. So from there,
and Angular is super opinionated, right? It's got its services, it's got its DI. It uses a lot of. That's one thing I think people coming from React world into Angular world might be a little bit unfamiliar with. At least in TypeScript, would be all of the decorators that are put like everywhere in Angular. And if you haven't done like Nest.js or one of those, that also makes use of decorators very extensively. Those are kind of like, oh, okay, that's a new thing that I haven't seen before. Because I don't React, other than like MobX, I haven't seen much in terms of decorators.
I don't know. The funny thing is, I think what I should have mentioned is if I had learned or maybe jumped to Angular earlier, maybe only after a few months of knowing React, I probably would have, when I was more of a junior dev, I would have gotten very angry, right? Like, oh, you have to do this and this and this, and they have all these rules, right? But now that, building so many React apps, you say, oh, okay, yes, they have their specific way of doing it, but this is the way to do it in Angular. So yeah, it's always, as always, there's advantages and disadvantages. But I think at the end of the day, just because I just love software at its heart and programming in general, I do like React more, right? Because they just say, here's your canvas, go build your projects however you want, right? So, yeah.
So in addition to writing blog posts and having your own website where you have lots of great content, it looks like you also have a YouTube channel. Can you tell us a little bit about, what kind of videos we could expect to see there?
Yeah. So, I started kind of minor YouTubing last year during the pandemic. So mostly what it is they're actually previews for courses that I sell, and quite generous, at least in my opinion, up to 50% or more of the full course. So lessons there. And then I also do these things called Let's Codes, where it's just, I don't have anything scripted or anything prepared. I'm just maybe, fooling around. I made a soundboard, or we're starting to build a soundboard. And yeah, they're usually longer format, like an hour or so. So yeah, that's what I have. Haven't had published a video very recently because I've been busy with the startup work. But yeah, that's kind of what people can expect there.
Very
That's cool.
What kind of courses do you have?
So I have one on Bitbucket pipelines. So basically how you can automate builds and deploys. And I also have one on generic search. So in React TypeScript, generic search, sort, and filtering. So one thing, what I like to do, or at least my plan is, as I have a few ideas for further courses, one thing I like to focus on is kind of stuff that I've encountered in enterprise applications or real world scenarios, right? Because too often, especially when you really get into the weeds somewhere and you get kind of stuck, you go to look for an example and it's the infamous React to do app, for example, or you see you see the same examples over and over again. So I really try and design courses around stuff that I actually use or have used or have seen before in production. And of course, you can never provide every example from every application everywhere, but gives a bit of flavor of here's the drawbacks and advantages of this method. And I've actually, these are the patterns I use or have used. So
yeah, I definitely get that with my stuff. I tend to segregate, and particularly in like the TypeScript world, I tend to segregate into like basic, intermediate, and advanced type stuff. Like, for example, with generics, most of the generic stuff that I do is, unless it's very, very simple, like it's the promise generic or it's, return type or something like that. Like it's kind of in the advanced section because at least in the TypeScript world, like generally speaking, you're not going to be using generics all that much. Actually, React.function component is one that people use all the time, but it's very valuable.
Yeah. And that's, I actually listened to one of the previous episodes, the do's and don'ts, and I thought, I have a course about generics. Shouldn't use that. but I will push back a bit. And I agree. I mean, if you're in the front end, overdoing it on generics is probably something's gone wrong there. But I do use it in an app, for example, where you have a table, right? And the API had a new type coming in, so that means like a new column, right? And if you want the sort and filter, all you have to do is add it. If you design everything generically, you just have to add it to, for example, like a JSON config, and you say like this column, and then how you configure the sort direction and things like that. So there are advantages, but yeah, it's definitely important to know when and where to use them.
Yeah, if you're building like a library of components, particularly around like stuff that has lists in it, like a list component or table component, as you said, yeah, there's a lot of value in there in terms of generics where you're going to get good hinting, when it comes to, like here's the primary sort key. And the reason that you can know that is because you're using a generic when it comes to the incoming data type. You're making sure that whatever that sort key is actually a key on the objects in that table. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's a good thing to know. I think there's this advanced side that like people can just go super geeky with and like you just get totally lost.
Yeah.
It's like, you just, keep it sane. Because nobody else will be able to like actually come in after you and be able to maintain that if you go kind of full crazy with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I'm actually kind of interested in hearing more about, Chris. So you came into the company and helped them transform the code base from straight JavaScript and React into TypeScript. Were there other developers who were working with you, so you got to kind of help them get up to speed with TypeScript, or was it more of just getting a little bit of buy-in from the product managers and helping them understand how this would introduce less bugs into the code and make future development easier? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so that would have been the plan had I stayed longer. And I was quite looking forward to it because TypeScript is kind of still slowly up and coming. But yeah, it was mostly just this conversion, and I left a lot of stuff in the README about what I did and going forward. So the next person who encounters this repository with a bunch of weird alliterations and terms and stuff can hopefully figure it out quicker. But yeah, unfortunately, I just wasn't there long enough to kind of share that.
So what advice would you have for somebody coming into TypeScript? Maybe they're on an existing application and they want to upgrade it, but don't really know where to start. Like, are there resources that you would recommend, or just create a TS config and start watching what breaks and trying to fix it as the errors come up? What's your advice there?
Yeah, so that could be a way. That was my way, just creating the TS config and going at it. I guess the first thing would be, I have some recent experience actually with this exactly. One hint is if you were using prop types, that's a quick way or a quick hint to maybe look at your prop types, and that's basically a 1-to-1 conversion to an interface. Right. So I think we mentioned this maybe before the show started, but if you're doing TypeScript with React, if you type your props with an interface, you've already got maybe 90% of the big wins from using TypeScript, right? Because this name is a string, title's a string. And I know these sound like simple examples, but when you're passing an array of some object type, then this array is this object type. And then even further, as you go down into your component tree, okay, maybe this lower component takes only a single element of that object array. And you know everything. And as soon as you, maybe at the very top of your app, change that type, you're going to see it all the way down through in the IntelliSense. Oh, hey, name is not name anymore. It's first name. So something like that. So yeah, to convert the prop types into these prop interfaces, then you're done. No, I don't know.
Well, I would add on to that. I might actually start from like the API layer, because every app basically has, some API calls you're going to make, right? Get the data, and then you're going to have your React components that are going to render that data. And if you start with the API side of the house and you just kind of lay down those foundational types, like here's the type for a product, and here's the type for a car or whatever we're doing, right? The actual domain types. And then as you go through the React stuff, right, then you're just saying, oh, this prop is a car, and you've got those things already. And so those can line up with the API. And then you're getting, that nice all the way through typing. So that, as you say, right, if you change tire type on car, right, that it's going to make sure, oh, okay, so now these three components need to be updated because they're looking at the old thing, tire, whatever it was. And now there's a tire type and they need to be updated, which is great. I mean, that's really the huge win, right? So yes, the IntelliSense is awesome, and the hinting, but it's really when you're working on a project and you don't know, and the API is changing underneath you, that, that's, you can just change the types And now you can see, okay, oops, I forgot that we use it over there. Turns out we do. I'm just going to need to go change that. And there you go.
And one thing that I would recommend, because we just added it to one of our projects at work, is ESLint. We added an ESLint with, I think it was probably the Airbnb TypeScript config. And that ESLint just in general helped me improve my coding, just learning some of the things that they generally try and discourage. So having the TypeScript version now that is catching all sorts of, TypeScript anti-patterns and code smells and things like that has been really cool. And I'm looking forward to letting it kind of help teach me more about good TypeScript practices. So, that was easy because there's so many good configurations that are already available and you just plug them in and it goes to work. So that's pretty good as well.
Yeah, the Airbnb one is excellent.
If I could add one more thing, typically what I do in a TypeScript project is I'll just make a little NPM script. I just call it type check maybe. And it's just the TSC and then -- no omit. And so if you've just converted your project, it might be a bit scary. You may or may not see thousands of errors or warnings. And the thing to remember is that doesn't mean the code is broken, right? So when I ran that for this large project, there were thousands of errors, right? But really what that means is it's just that in the JavaScript version, you don't know what types are interacting there or what's going on there. And then it's a matter of, you may want to echo it out to a file and go through maybe component by component and see what's going on. But that's a nice way to see. And I even add it to my kind of the build pipeline. That's kind of before even like unit tests, you can run like the type check and make sure you have no errors. So
yeah, if you put on strict and you don't allow any, it's not going to be happy. Not for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everything's any until it ain't any anymore. Yeah. And definitely get a handle on what the difference between any and unknown is, because that's really critical.
Yeah, that's something even I still struggle with, or perhaps I don't understand very well, is those like the error type. And I think there may be even an open issue with like the ECMAScript standard, like TypeScript needs a type for that error, but for now it's this unknown type.
Yeah.
It's still evolving. We're getting there, but JavaScript's had a lot longer to kind of come together and break it at build time and run time. So TypeScript is doing quite well, I would say, for how short a time it's been in existence.
There's definitely a need there, as the code base gets larger, to actually have some sanity around your typing.
So what are some of your favorite plugins to use with TypeScript? I know you said that VS Code is your editor of choice, which it is mine as well, but are there some like super helpful extensions that you like to include that you think are really good for TypeScript?
Not really. I mean, you already mentioned ESLint. I think it's the Microsoft marriage there. So just with the IntelliSense already, you get most of the benefit. So yeah, that's usually it. Just TypeScript alone for me is enough.
Sometimes I'll use JSON to TS if I'm working on a API that's not Swagger based, because I'm just getting back a JSON payload and I have it. I just copy it out of a browser or something, and then I can use JSON to TS, and that'll actually just convert it to whatever in the clipboard it types. It saves you some typing.
I have to look that
that's
up.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We'll
okay. There you go.
Notes.
He's busy. Cool. My pleasure.
Anything else you'd recommend, Jack?
Trying to think if there's anything TypeScript specific. I have used in a video recently this thing called Quokka, which is kind of cool. Great, funny name for something that's actually pretty cool. It's actually like it's a free, although there is a premium version, kind of TypeScript or JavaScript workbook. So as you type, it's automatically evaluating as you go. So if you've got something where, I want to just, see how this filter works or something along that line. Yeah, you can just kind of type it into Quokka and it will evaluate it right there, and you can get the output and say, okay, that's reduce is a good, when you're like, how does this reduce work again? I don't know. You can pull that out into Quokka and go, I see how that works. Cool.
Nice. I have heard of Quokka, and I think that I tried it out once, but I really didn't see the benefit of it at that point in time. And it's been a couple of years since I tested it out, but I would definitely look at it again.
Cool.
Hey folks, if you love this podcast and would like to support the show, or If you wish you could listen without the sponsorship messages, then you're in luck. We're setting up new premium podcast feeds where you can get all of the episodes released after Christmas 2020 without the ads. Signing up will help us pay for editing and production, and you can go sign up at devchat.tv/premium.
Well, I think that's actually a great segue into picks. I'll get some picks for this week. So, Paige, you want to kick us off with a pick?
Sure. I will do 2 picks this week. One that is a purely entertainment pick, and that is a show that's on Hulu called The Great, which is about Catherine the Great, or it's loosely based on her initial coming to Russia and marrying Peter and kind of establishing herself as a monarch there. And it was originally only supposed to be 1 season, but it was so incredibly popular that they're bringing it back for a 2nd season. And I think that that's starting within the next week or so. So been rewatching the 1st season and really enjoying it just as much the 2nd time around. So that'll be my first pick. And then my second pick is actually going to be a React NPM library that I came across recently, and it's called React Leaflet. And it is great if you want to bring maps into any of your applications, even with something like Next.js, which has server-side rendering, or regular Create React app, where you might want to render paths or markers or pop-ups or things like that. It takes in all the best pieces of things like the GeoJSON maps and Mapbox and just makes it React friendly. And they have a lot of really good tutorials and examples of code and how to do different things. So if you have any use for maps, which I think are just really cool and great visualizations in applications, I would definitely encourage that if you're trying to do it with a React project. And I'll include links for both of those in the show notes.
That's awesome. Leaflet.
Mm-hmm.
It's an odd name.
It is.
Mapping.
It is, but it's fairly popular, not just for React, but for all sorts of canvas-based map stuff. And they have lots of different, designs and overlays that you can do. So if you like a dark design, they've got those, and you can make your own and then just kind of import them on top. And it's really pretty robust for what it offers, and it's pretty cool.
It's very cool. You're so right about data visualizations on maps. Actually, I've gotten back into running again, and it was really cool, the Apple Watch kind of integration where it would show me my heart rate at various points in my run. And it was so cool to see it go from yellow to red or back. I don't know if that's good or not. Maybe it's not good being red, but it was good to see. It's oh yeah, I was really huffing it there, or I was, so that was nice part of it. So my pick for this week is Arcane on Netflix. It's based on, I think, League of Legends, but I have no idea, honestly, what's going on with this show because I'm not a League of Legends player, but it's beautiful. And sometimes just having, something just lovely to watch sometimes is just kind of cool. So just enjoying the heck out of Arcane. And I think it's weirdly Netflix style, coming out in 3 groups of 3. But yeah, it's fun. It's really good.
Very cool.
All right. So Chris, what's your pick?
So I also have 2. They're more technical ones. The first is Redux Toolkit, which we briefly mentioned, but it basically, for what Redux was famous for, all this boilerplate, it eliminates almost all of that.
And it makes it TypeScript friendly too.
Yeah.
It gets the typing right. Yeah.
I would say, it's a little bit weird at the beginning, just because it looks so different from what you may be used to in traditional Redux. But it's awesome. I like it. And bonus points for their query, which helps you write the RTK query. So
RTK query is excellent.
I've just started with that. If you wanted to talk about something hard to switch over to from a traditional API, that would be something much more difficult. But luckily, I have a project I'm starting with scratch from, and it's very cool. It does the loading, error states, everything, and it's all reactive straight out of the box.
Yeah, you can always get the happy path of API access. It's easy. It's getting all the loading, error, all of the extra kind of pending states right, and RTK query gets that right. React query gets that right. So it's always good to use a wrapper for that.
And
what's your second pick?
The second one is this cool tool called SVG OMG, and it's I'll have to send the link. It's the guy is Jake Archibald. It's he's ported some tool, but it's basically a GUI that it optimizes SVGs for you. And there's some 20 odd options you can do. If you want to deactivate ViewBox, you can have a simplification slider. So I work a lot with SVG logos, for example, but when they come straight from the Illustrator, sometimes they're massive, right? So you need to clean them up a bit sometimes. And that's such a great tool. It's one I really love. So
nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for Chris being on the show, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.